When we talk about breakthrough, people often imagine a sudden moment, an explosion, a divine intervention, a miracle that shifts everything in an instant. But the truth is, long before anything changes around you, something must first change within you. Breakthrough doesn't begin on the outside. It begins in the inner chambers of your mind, in the silent battlefield where your thoughts wrestle with your faith, your fears, your past, and your possibilities. The greatest enemy of your next level is not the devil, not the people who doubted you, not the circumstances that tried to crush you. It is the mindset that has kept you bound to what you have always known. To step into a breakthrough, you must be willing to think differently, see differently, believe differently, and expect differently. Breakthrough begins where old thought patterns die and new ones are born. It starts the moment you stop telling yourself that where you've been is all you'll ever be. Most people pray for doors to open, but they never consider whether their mindset is capable of walking through that door. They ask God for increase while thinking small. They ask for healing while holding on to the identity of brokenness. They ask for opportunities while still seeing themselves as unqualified. You cannot receive a breakthrough in a mindset that is wired for limitation. God can pour out abundance, but if your mind is conditioned to lack, you reject what he's trying to give. That's why the Bible says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformation is not an event, it's a process. You can change your clothes, your environment, your job, even the people around you, but if your mind doesn't shift, you will recreate the same patterns in every new season. Breakthrough is not about being surrounded by new things, it's about becoming a new person who can handle them. Think about the children of Israel. God freed them from slavery, but they carried a slave mentality into the wilderness. They were physically out of Egypt, but Egypt was still living inside their thinking. God promised them a land flowing with milk and honey, but they saw giants instead of promise, obstacles instead of opportunity. They were standing in front of their breakthrough, but their mindset wouldn't let them enter. The greatest distance in your spiritual journey is not from where you are to where God is taking you. It's the distance between your old mindset and the one required to step into your new season. You can be inches away from destiny and still miss it if your thinking is anchored to the past. A mindset shift is not easy. It requires acknowledging that the thoughts that carried you this far may not carry you further. It requires separating who you are from who you used to be. Many people cling to old beliefs because they're familiar, even if they're destructive. But breakthrough demands discomfort. You must be willing to confront the lies you believed about yourself. Maybe you were told you weren't enough and you internalized it. Maybe life disappointed you and you settled into survival mode. Maybe failure shaped your expectations and now you don't dream big anymore. But God is calling you to release the thoughts that diminish you. You cannot think like a prisoner and walk like a conqueror. You cannot carry a defeated mindset into a victorious season. When your mindset changes, your language changes. Where you used to say, I can't, you begin to say, I will. Where you used to say, maybe one day, you start to say, this is my time. Where you used to fear the unknown, you begin to embrace possibility. Your breakthrough begins at the moment your words stop agreeing with your fears and start aligning with your faith. Thoughts shape words. Words shape actions. Actions shape habits. Habits shape destiny. If you want a different destiny, it starts with a different thought. Changing your mindset also requires protecting your mental environment. You cannot embrace a breakthrough mentality while surrounding yourself with people who thrive on negativity, doubt, and fear. Some people are committed to staying stuck. They love comfort more than growth. They prefer predictability over possibility. If you allow their mindset to influence you, you'll shrink yourself to fit their expectations. Breakthrough requires intentional separation. Sometimes God has to remove people from your life because their mindset contradicts the new identity he's forming in you. You cannot think like a champion while walking with people who celebrate mediocrity. You cannot dream like an eagle while flocking with chickens. Mindset is contagious. Guard yours with everything you have. A breakthrough mindset is a mindset that sees beyond the present moment. It allows you to believe in what you cannot yet see. It tells you that delay is not denial, that obstacles are not indicators of failure, that setbacks are setups for something greater. When your mind is aligned with breakthrough, you begin to reinterpret everything through the lens of purpose. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this preparing me for? You begin to understand that every frustration is building your resilience. Every disappointment is strengthening your focus. Every challenge is sharpening your faith. Breakthrough thinkers don't crumble under pressure, they rise because they recognize that pressure is the birthplace of transformation. One of the greatest signs that your mindset has shifted is when you stop waiting for external validation. Breakthrough thinkers do not need the approval of others to believe in what God has placed inside them. They understand that people may not see their value yet, but that doesn't diminish it. They know that purpose is not voted on by anyone. When your mind is renewed, you stop living for applause and start living for alignment. You stop measuring your progress by how others perceive you and start measuring it by how faithful you are to what God has called you to do. Some of the greatest breakthroughs happen when you stop trying to convince others and start believing in yourself. A breakthrough mindset is also rooted in gratitude. Gratitude shifts your focus from what you lack to what you have, from what's wrong to what's right, from where you failed to where you grew. Gratitude keeps your heart soft while life tries to harden it. It lifts your perspective and opens your spirit to receive more. A grateful mindset is fertile ground for breakthrough because it positions you to see God's hand even in the small things. When you begin to see the miracle in everyday moments, your faith expands, your expectations rise, and your spirit becomes aligned with possibility. Breakthrough doesn't always start with a big moment. Sometimes it starts with a little gratitude. Fear is another area where mindset determines breakthrough. Fear is not the absence of faith. It is misplaced focus. It is magnifying the problem instead of the promise. When your mind shifts, you learn to acknowledge fear without bowing to it. You begin to see fear as a sign that you're stepping into unfamiliar territory, which is often the exact place where breakthrough lives. Fear says, what if it doesn't work? Faith says, what if it does? Fear says, you're not ready. Faith says, God will equip you as you go. Fear says, stay where it's safe. Faith says, step where God is calling. Breakthrough begins when your mindset chooses faith over fear, not once, but every day, in every decision, with every step. Ultimately, a breakthrough mindset is a partnership with God. It is choosing to think according to His word, His promises, and His purpose for your life. It is allowing Him to shape your perspective, renew your thoughts, and elevate your expectations. God cannot pour new wine into old wineskins, and He cannot pour breakthrough into a mind that refuses to change. When your mindset aligns with heaven, breakthrough becomes inevitable. It may not come all at once, but it begins the moment you decide to think differently. Your life rises to the level of your thoughts. And if you want your life to rise higher, your mindset must rise with it. Breakthrough begins in the unseen places, the quiet decisions, the hidden thoughts, the internal shifts. It begins the moment you refuse to let your past define your future. It begins when you stop replaying what went wrong and start imagining what can go right. It begins when you stop living in survival mode and begin operating in purpose. Your breakthrough starts the moment you say, I am done thinking small. I am done limiting myself. I am done shrinking to fit places God is calling me out of. My mindset is shifting, my thoughts are aligning, and I am preparing for the breakthrough that God has already prepared for me. When your mind shifts, everything else follows. Your habits change, your decisions change, your confidence changes, your energy changes, your relationships change, your results change. Breakthrough is not waiting for you at some distant moment. It is waiting for you in your next thought, your next belief, your next expectation. Your breakthrough starts the moment your mind wakes up to the truth that you were never meant to stay where you've been. The door may have been closed, but your mindset holds the key. And the moment you unlock it, everything begins to move. Breakthrough begins in your mind, and that means it can begin right now. Breakthrough is not just about what God is bringing you into, it is also about what God is pulling you away from. You cannot carry everything into your next season. There are weights, relationships, mindsets, habits, and emotional residues that simply cannot cross over with you. Breakthrough is not only addition, sometimes it is subtraction. Sometimes God's greatest gift is not what he gives, but what he removes. And if you want to step into your breakthrough, you must be willing to let go of what cannot go with you. Many people miss their breakthrough because they are trying to drag dead things into living places. They want God to do something new while they cling to what is old. They want God to open a new door while their hand is still gripping the old one. You cannot walk into the future while holding hands with your past. Breakthrough requires release, spiritual release, mental release, emotional release, relational release. Until you let go of what is behind you, you cannot embrace what is ahead of you. Letting go starts with recognizing what has expired. Not everything that was good for you then is good for you now. Some relationships were perfect for your previous season, but destructive for the one you are entering. Some habits helped you survive, but cannot help you thrive. Some environments once nurtured you, but now limit you. Breakthrough requires discernment, knowing what to carry, what to leave, and what to surrender. Sometimes the hardest things to let go of are the things that feel comfortable. Familiarity can be dangerous because it convinces you that good enough is all you deserve. But breakthrough does not happen in comfort zones. Breakthrough happens when you are willing to detach from what is familiar in order to embrace what is greater. Abraham had to leave his father's house. The disciples had to leave their nets. Israel had to leave Egypt. Breakthrough requires movement, and movement requires release. Letting go is also about releasing your attachment to how you thought things would go. Many people are stuck because they are clinging to an old blueprint, an old plan, an old timeline, an old expectation of how life should have unfolded. But God's path rarely matches your plan. Breakthrough happens when you stop trying to resurrect what God has already ended. It happens when you trust his way over your own. Sometimes your plan must die so God's promise can live. One of the most difficult things to release is the hurt you've accumulated. Pain has a way of embedding itself in our identity, shaping how we think, talk, and respond. But if you try to carry old wounds into a new season, they will sabotage what God is doing. Bitterness will poison opportunity. Unhealed trauma will distort blessing. Resentment will block connection. Breakthrough requires healing, not forgetting the pain, but releasing its authority over your life. You cannot break into a new chapter if you're still reading the last one over and over. Letting go of hurt does not mean what happened was okay. It means you refuse to give it ongoing power. Breakthrough is not just freedom from situations. It is freedom from the emotional weight they left behind. You cannot soar when your soul is anchored to offense. You cannot climb when your heart is shackled to disappointment. Healing is part of breakthrough because healing frees you to move. Letting go also means releasing the version of yourself that was shaped by survival mode. Many people have learned to function and struggle. They know how to fight, hustle, and endure, but they don't know how to rest, receive, and embrace abundance. They are so used to being strong that they don't know how to be supported. So used to expecting the worst that they don't recognize the best. So used to rejection that acceptance feels foreign. But breakthrough requires becoming someone new. You cannot step into a blessed season with a broken identity. You must release the self that trauma built and embrace the self God is restoring. Sometimes what you need to let go of is not something painful, but something good but limited. The greatest enemy of great is not bad, it's good enough. Many people settle because things are comfortable, predictable, and manageable. But breakthrough requires stretching. You cannot hold on to mediocrity and expect excellence to manifest. Letting go of limited thinking, limited expectations, and limited dreams is essential. God cannot fill a container that refuses to be enlarged. If you want breakthrough, you must release the boundaries you placed around your own life. You must dare to believe that something greater is possible. Breakthrough also demands letting go of people. Not out of anger or bitterness, but out of alignment. Not everyone is meant to go where you're going. Some people were assigned to your past, not your future. Some were seasonal, not eternal. Some were meant to teach you, not accompany you. Some were meant to support your growth, and others were meant to reveal your strength through their absence. Letting go of people does not mean you stop loving them. It means you stop limiting yourself for them. It means you stop shrinking to fit their comfort zone. It It means you stop carrying relationships that God has already released. God often removes the wrong people before he brings the right ones. But many people miss the new because they're too focused on the old. Breakthrough requires closing relational doors that no longer lead to purpose. You cannot stay attached to people who drain you, diminish you, or detour you from destiny. You cannot let loyalty trap you in places where God did not call you to remain. Release is not rejection. Release is protection. Letting go is not easy because it often feels like loss. But spiritual maturity is realizing that when God asks you to let go, he is never taking something from you. He is making room for something greater. Your hands must be empty to receive what he is pouring. Your heart must be open to experience what he is revealing. Your spirit must be surrendered to step into what he is unfolding. Breakthrough requires capacity, and capacity is created by releasing what no longer belongs. Another aspect of letting go is releasing the timeline. Many people place God under pressure, expecting him to move by a certain moment, fulfill a promise by a certain age, or manifest breakthrough on a personal schedule. But breakthrough does not operate under human deadlines. God is never late, but he is never rushed. You must let go of the urgency, anxiety, and frustration tied to timing. When you trust God's timing, you stop forcing things, you stop manipulating outcomes, you stop settling out of impatience, you start flowing rather than striving. Breakthrough happens when timing aligns with readiness, and readiness begins in the heart. Letting go is not a one-time event, it is an ongoing practice. Every new level requires leaving something behind. Every elevation requires a separation. Every breakthrough requires a release. God will continually reveal what cannot move forward with you, and your willingness to release determines your capacity to receive. Letting go also demands courage. Courage to walk away from what you've outgrown. Courage to release the identities that were formed in pain. Courage to end cycles that have lasted years. Courage to say no more to habits that sabotage your destiny. Courage to trust that God has something greater even when you cannot see it yet. The courage to let go is the courage to believe. Breakthrough is costly. It will cost you old thinking. It will cost you expired relationships. It will cost you familiar comforts. It will cost you emotional residue. It will cost you your past identity. But in return, God gives clarity, freedom, elevation, peace, and purpose. What you release is always inferior to what God replaces it with. Letting go is the doorway into breakthrough. Everything you're praying for is on the other side of release. The person you're becoming cannot thrive under the weight of who you used to be. Your next season requires lighter hands, clearer vision, healed emotions, and a surrendered spirit. You cannot move forward carrying what was never meant for the journey. Release it. Release the weight, release the fear, release the people, release the past, release the limitations, release the identity that has expired. Your breakthrough begins the moment you let go. Faith is the engine of breakthrough. Without it, everything stalls, everything hesitates, everything remains in the realm of what if instead of what is. Many people pray for breakthroughs, hope for change, and cry out for miracles, but they never truly move because their faith waits for proof before it acts. Breakthrough doesn't wait for evidence, it waits for action. It waits for faith to step out while the circumstances still look impossible. True faith is believing before seeing, trusting when the world says otherwise, and walking boldly into what God has promised, even when the natural eye cannot yet perceive it. Breakthrough happens at the moment your faith outruns your fear and defies your doubts. Faith is not passive. It is not a wish or a hope that something good might happen. Faith is active, persistent, and relentless. It is what causes a person to get out of bed and move toward God's promises, even when every rational reason says to stay where they are. It is what makes a widow give her last meal, a man step into a hostile environment, a believer speak a word of life when the evidence shouts death. Breakthrough happens when faith becomes bigger than fear, louder than doubt, and stronger than the weight of delay. It is a daily choice to trust God's timing, his methods, and his promises, even when the journey seems long and the night feels endless. Many people fail to experience their breakthrough because their faith is conditional. They say, I'll believe it if I see it, or I'll trust God if he proves it first. But the moment you put conditions on faith, you limit God's ability to move. God doesn't need your proof, he needs your obedience. God doesn't wait for your understanding, he waits for your trust. Breakthrough comes when you trust beyond what you know. When you move forward on the unseen path. When you say, I may not understand it, but I will follow it. It is in those moments of uncertainty, when your faith carries you past reason and into obedience, that the supernatural intersects with the natural. Faith is also a matter of perspective. It changes the way you see obstacles, delays, and disappointments. Someone with weak faith sees a closed door and panics. Someone with strong faith sees the same door and sees God preparing a new way. Someone with weak faith sees a storm and worries. Someone with strong faith sees a storm and recognizes God walking with them in it. Breakthrough does not always come by removing the obstacle immediately. Sometimes it comes by strengthening the one who walks through it. Faith is the lens through which breakthrough becomes visible even when circumstances seem impossible. Faith is refined through patience and persistence. The Bible tells the story of Abraham, who waited decades for the promise of Isaac. He faced years of doubt, delay, and disappointment, yet he did not abandon his faith. He believed God's word even when it seemed humanly impossible. Breakthrough requires this kind of endurance, a faith that does not collapse under delay, does not waver under difficulty, and does not give up under opposition. It is the faith that says, I may not see it yet, but I believe it is coming, and keeps standing, keeps believing, keeps acting, keeps hoping. Faith grows stronger as it is exercised. And breakthrough is the reward of faith that refuses to quit. Faith also requires risk. It requires stepping into the unknown without guarantees. It requires leaving the familiar, the safe, and the predictable, and trusting that God will meet you where you are going. The disciples left their nets. Peter stepped out onto the water. Moses confronted Pharaoh. All of these were acts of faith. Breakthrough always requires risk because the new season cannot be entered while clinging to the old. Faith is the courage to act when you cannot see the outcome, the strength to move when everything says stay, the confidence to step when the ground seems uncertain. Without faith, risk is paralyzing. With faith, risk becomes the pathway to destiny. Faith is strengthened through the Word of God. Every promise in the Bible exists not just for knowledge, but for activation. When you meditate on the Word, when you speak it over your life, when you let it shape your thoughts, your faith begins to rise. It is the Word of God that teaches your spirit to trust Him even when the world says otherwise. Breakthrough is born when your mind and spirit are saturated with God's promises and you refuse to allow fear, doubt, or delay to silence them. Faith aligns your heart with God's plan, and aligned faith produces unstoppable breakthrough. Another aspect of faith is obedience. Faith without action is incomplete. Believing in your heart is vital, but breakthrough often requires your feet to move, your hands to work, and your voice to speak. God calls you to step forward in faith even when you do not see the full picture. Faith without action waits indefinitely. Faith with action activates the promise. The Israelites had to march around Jericho. David had to confront Goliath. Rahab had to hide the spies. Every act of faith moved them closer to breakthrough. Obedience is faith in motion, and breakthrough is the natural result of obedient faith. Faith also requires trust over understanding. You will not always know the how or the when. You will not always understand why things happen or why doors remain closed. But breakthrough happens when you trust God despite uncertainty. Trust says, I don't see the full path, but I know the one who does. Trust says, I don't know the plan, but I know the planner. When your faith chooses trust over understanding, God's power is released in ways that defy logic and transcend circumstance. Breakthrough happens when you step out with confidence that God is already working behind the scenes on your behalf. Faith is not built in isolation. It is reinforced by prayer, community, and testimony. When you pray persistently, when you surround yourself with believers who encourage and challenge you, when you hear stories of God's faithfulness, your own faith grows. Breakthrough is often a collective experience. It is influenced by the spiritual environment around you. You are strengthened when you see what God has done in others' lives and reminded that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Faith flourishes in an atmosphere of expectation, encouragement, and connection. Faith also fuels perseverance in the face of opposition. Every breakthrough journey encounters resistance, spiritual, emotional, or physical. Satan does not release territory without a fight. Circumstances do not shift without confrontation. Opposition is inevitable, but faith gives you the power to endure it. Faith says, I will not be moved by the storm. I will not be shaken by delay. I will not be defeated by resistance. Breakthrough happens when you refuse to surrender, when you stand firm in your faith, when you continue to believe and act, even when everything seems to oppose you. Faith keeps hope alive. Hope and faith are inseparable. Without faith, hope fades, and without hope, action dies. Breakthrough requires hope, the confident expectation that God is about to move, that the impossible will become possible, that the delay is only temporary. Faith is the muscle that strengthens hope. It is what enables you to keep envisioning the promise, keep speaking it, keep reaching for it, even when the evidence is scarce. Breakthrough comes when your hope refuses to die and your faith refuses to waver. Faith is also about surrender. It is not self-reliance. It is reliance on God. Many people try to manufacture breakthrough through effort alone, but true breakthrough always requires partnership with the divine. Faith says, Lord, I trust you to handle what I cannot. I believe your hand is moving even when I cannot see it. I surrender my understanding, my control, and my timing into your hands. Surrendered faith allows God to orchestrate things in ways far beyond human imagination. Breakthrough is often God's work, but faith is your part, your active, intentional, persistent trust that invites him to move. Faith is tested, but every test strengthens it. Abraham was tested, Moses was tested, Joseph was tested, and so many others. The testing of faith is not a punishment, it is preparation. It is what refines you, removes doubt, and proves your readiness. Breakthrough comes after faith has been tried, stretched, and strengthened. When you stand firm under testing, when you continue to believe despite trials, you position yourself for a breakthrough that is both enduring and profound. Ultimately, breakthrough is a faith-driven process. It is not for the passive, the fearful, or the hesitant. It is for those who believe that God is bigger than their obstacles, that his promises are true even when circumstances are false, and that stepping out in faith is a pathway to receiving all he has prepared. Your breakthrough happens when you decide to act on what God has spoken, when you trust beyond the visible, when you persevere beyond doubt, and when you let faith that sees the unseen, believes the impossible, and moves when it cannot yet prove, carry you into the destiny that is already yours. Faith does not guarantee ease, but it guarantees breakthrough. Faith does not always remove the obstacle, but it gives you power to overcome it. Faith does not always answer every question, but it opens the door for God to reveal his plan. Breakthrough comes when faith steps before evidence, acts before approval, and trusts before certainty. The moment you believe, the moment you act, the moment you move forward in faith, your breakthrough begins.